Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the virtual Ossining Public Library. I'm Diana Lennon, Head of Adult Services, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to our new series called Ossining Perspectives. In this series, we'll be discussing both historical and current perspectives about living in Ossining. We'll hear how others experience life here and talk about how we are living together now. We hope a community that listens to each other will be one that can open hearts and minds about each other. After we hear about an aspect of Ossining's history, we'll have a discussion about life in Ossining. How did we get here? Where are we now? And where are we headed together? To begin our series today and to celebrate Black History Month, Ossining Village historian Joyce Cole will share her research to connect, empathize, and honor the generations of Black citizens that broke through barriers to benefit the community of Ossining as a whole. Many of you know Joyce, I think already, but for those of you who do not, she is a lifelong resident of Ossining with deep roots here. She has a passion for genealogy and local research and is an advocate for all of us to learn about our family and local history as it fosters a better understanding of ourselves and the community. She's a founding member and lead research for the Little Birdie County Genealogical Society, which facilitates the library's genealogy group. Joyce is a member of the Ossining Historic Preservation Commission. She also developed a genealogical program called DIG, Discovering in Genealogy, and works with the library on the Ossining COVID-19 Memory Project, which documents how the Ossining community is managing everyday life and how we've endured as a community through this pandemic. I encourage you to visit our website at ossininglibrary.org to see the COVID-19 Memory Project LibGuide, and of course, our African American History and Literature LibGuide. I also encourage you to visit, by appointment, Joyce's exhibit at the Bethany Arts Community, and which is there through March 5th, I believe. It's entitled Ossining Black History and Culture, Resilience, Dedication, and Excellence. Joyce is going to introduce our other panelists today, so welcome, Joyce.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on, as Diana said, this nice rainy day. So I'm excited to do this. When Diana approached me about Ossining perspectives, and I've been collecting oral histories on people, so I thought that this would be a perfect opportunity to start sharing some of those oral histories, and it turned out to work out that way because before we start, one of our guests was not able to make it, and it was Grace Neighbors Jones. However, because I have taken an oral history on her, we will still hear her voice by her permission today. So I want to introduce everyone. First, what we thought of initially was having a round table to talk about the lived experiences over decades. So we're going to hear from a young Black male that lives here currently, then I don't want to say middle-aged, Miss Althema, but the middle of that, Althema Goodson, and then Grace Neighbors Jones would have been representing the elders. So Gavin Thomas Walters is a freshman at OHS, and he is so far a lifelong resident. We hope when he goes away to college, he comes back like the rest of us did. And Althema Goodson, who is also a library board member, an activist, a social change agent, and a lifelong resident. There's nothing like Althema doesn't do. So I'll be here all day introducing her. And Grace Neighbors Jones, who is unable to be here on Zoom, but we will hear her voice. And she was raised in Ossining, went on to live an incredible life, and so vibrant. I can't wait for you to hear her history because she's just contagious. That she was amazing. So I just want Gavin and Althema to say a little bit about themselves if they would like. Gavin?
Hello, my name is Gavin. I'm currently 14, turning 15 this year, and I'm a freshman at OHS. Currently the class president of the freshman class, and then the second captain on the JV basketball team.
Go Gavin. Thank you. Althema?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Althema Goodson. I currently sit on the board for the library as a trustee. And as Joyce said, I consider myself just a social change agent and advocate for Ossining.
She is being modest, everyone. And then Grace Neighbors Jones. So because she's not here, I just thought we would get right into, we're going to change the format a little bit. We're going to listen to Grace and we're going to feed off of her oral history to talk about the different topics ranging from schools to race relations and what it was like living in Ossining growing up and what kinds of things were available for you to do. And then at the end, we'll take some questions. So without further ado, I want to get into Grace's beautiful voice. I hope she's able to listen, even though she's not able to be here. But this is the first question that I asked her.
So you grew up on State Street, you said?
Only to the third grade. When we moved on State Street, I think maybe I was about 4 or 5. I was really young then. I can still see that, however. And but I went to Park School in the kindergarten.
Okay, so I'm going to stop there because we'll get into the schools. But so she grew up on State Street. So Gavin, where did you grow up when you well, you're still young, but where have you grown up?
So I originally lived in 61 Charter Circle, but due to a fire at the building, I had to move down to South Highland Avenue. So while I'm still growing up, the two places that I have lived in Ossining are 61 Charter Circle and then 151 South Highland Avenue.
Thank you. Althema?
I grew up until I was 10. I lived on Aqueduct Street, 22 Aqueduct Street. And then I moved to State Street.
Okay, great.
I currently say.
So you and Grace have something in common.
Yeah.
I grew up on Hamilton Avenue. I started there and then Water Street. So that was where I started. So we're going to go into where she started school. And I think this is really interesting. When you hear it, listen to the time period that she's talking about.
Do you know Park School? Well,
I went to
Park. You went where?
I went to Park School.
Oh, you did? Well, let me tell you. I was in the kindergarten. Yes, I was in the kindergarten when they built Park School. And I was there, I was in kindergarten for the opening, the year that it opened. And we had to walk from the old Park School to the new Park School carrying books and things, because we were moving into the new school. And my first grade I was in kindergarten. The room that's circular, is it still circular there? And Miss Becker was my kindergarten teacher. I don't know how I remember that, and I can still see us sitting in that round part of the room, sitting on the floor, and she would tell us stories and sing songs and da-da-da-da-da. And
where was the old Park School?
The old Park School, it's hard for me to remember myself where it was right close by, because I remember walking up that walkway, carrying books from one place to the other when we moved in there. But I can't remember exactly where it was. I guess it's sort of like next door. Yeah.
So did we know that there was more than one Park School? So what she's talking about, the second Park School was built in 1939. The first one was built in 1885. And she was right, they were right next door to each other. So say on the same property. So it started out as a primary school and then they built a bigger Park School. So did both of you, starting with Gavin, attend Park School? And if so, do you remember what grades you were in when you were in the Park School?
I did attend Park School, and I didn't go to pre-K there, but I did go for kindergarten. And the circular room that she was talking about sounds really familiar to me, because the room that I was in was all the way on the end, and it's the most circular part of the building, and it had a glass panel around it.
That part's new. So yeah, so she wouldn't have been in that part. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Gavin. Althema, did you attend Park School?
Yes, and I went from pre-K.
Okay. Do you remember anything, any experiences in Park School?
I remember that glass part. Like I can remember, but I feel like that's where you went to like line up to like go outside or like
Mhm.
I don't remember it being like what she said, but
Right.
I
So I
remember
went
it.
to Park School as well, and I started in pre-K. And I don't know if you remember, you had to interview to get into pre-K. Do any of you remember interviewing in your time period? Because I have 10 years on you, Althema.
Interview? No, I
Yeah,
don't
you had to
remember.
interview to get into pre-K. And I thought in my head that I was Gregory Hines's protege, and I did my own interpretation of tap dancing. And I probably would embarrass my entire family if someone recorded it and played it for everyone today. I was probably flailing around like a fish out of water, but that was my interview to get into Park School.
I'm gonna ask my mom about it. Maybe I did. I just don't remember.
So do any of you remember in Park School, the janitor, Stanley? Was he still there when you were there? White hair, and he looked like Santa Claus.
I remember
Yes.
Stanley.
So we
I
remember,
remember him.
yeah. How did you feel about Stanley? Stanley, I have very fond memories of him. He is like the biggest memory I have from Park School was Stanley the janitor.
Yes. My biggest memory, I don't know, like Miss Boswell, Miss Burnett, but I definitely remember Stanley.
Wasn't he Santa Claus? Or
So.
did he play Santa Claus at some point in the community? I feel like, I don't know, or maybe that's what I just saw him as all the time.
That might be your memory of him, Diana, because everyone thought he was Santa Claus. But I remember just always looking up to him and just being in awe. And he was just the nicest man ever. So I remember Stanley fondly. So we're gonna move on where Grace, it's gonna jump around a little bit. Where Grace is now gonna talk about a harder issue in schools. It's gonna address race in school. So I was telling everyone if you could be a little patient, because I have to do the timestamp, and I'm not as young as I used to, and the technology doesn't come as quickly as I used to. So 2:33, but I think I'm getting pretty good at it. Okay, here we go.
As you know from if you read that thing in kindergarten, we were maybe 3, 4, 5 Black kids. Everybody else was white, you know. But and that's how come I had to fight all, not really, but to get a part in a play, you know, or anything, all the way through high school. I had to do that, you know. They would never think of giving a part to any of us. And, you know, just because I was not shy or anything, I was sitting there when the parts went out to the other people, and I never got a part, you know, but I knew everybody's part. And I remember Sally Kearney. Oh, I have a picture of my second grade class. I must show that to you. Because Sally was still there. Then Sally did leave. I think she may have gone to a Catholic school or something. But I left Park School in 3rd grade. And I finished up 3rd grade, and then I went to Lincoln School, which is just up the street here, you know. But at any rate, Sally had the lead in the little play we were doing. It was a play on, you know, how to be clean and brushing your teeth and this and that. And if you're not, I don't remember the whole play, but at any rate, I know it started. I'm a very sick child, can't you tell? I need the best doctor to make me well. And then different things started going wrong, you know, and they would come to, but I remember that part, you know. Oh my God. Yeah. But that was a few years ago. And poor Sally, she was always getting sick, it seemed. And Mrs. Becker didn't know what she was going to do. And I said, I know Sally's part, you know. And so she let me try it. And I did it.
Oh, you did it?
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
Yeah. I did. And Sally got sick, man. She stayed sick. Yeah. And then Now, fourth grade, I had moved, to Lincoln School, and the same thing there, you never got to play a part in a play or anything like that. And so we were doing Hansel and Gretel, I think, that one. And Charlotte Rosenblum. she was the old witch, the mean old witch. And so Charlotte got sick, and I really didn't give them anything. It wasn't my fault, but Charlotte got sick. And so, but she got sick before it was the day of the play. And but I had said I knew Charlotte's part, and so they let me do it, And so I practiced with the other kids who were in the play. But then Charlotte came back, and Miss, I can't remember who that teacher was right now, but at any rate, she said, oh, Charlotte's back and Grace has been doing her part, And so she decided, well, let's take a vote, do you want Grace to do it or do you want Charlotte? And more kids said they wanted me to do it, which was surprising again, because it was mainly white kids. Again, we may have had a few more Black kids now, but not many. I can't remember. But anyhow, so I ended up doing the old witch part. Yeah.
So how many people thought that Grace was gonna end with that they chose her? Because I didn't think so. I didn't think when she told me that story and they voted, I was really shocked. So I say that with saying sometimes we make judgments on people, because my thought was going to be that they were going to be like, no, she's back, Grace can't do it. And it was the opposite. Kids have such an innocence about them that they wanted her to do it because they were used to her doing it. So with that being said, Grace experienced some hard things growing up, being passed over and knowing it at a young age because it was the color of her skin. But she did try. She never stopped trying to do what everyone else was doing. So we all lived in different times. So if you can talk about that or speak to that, if you've had that experience or if it's foreign to you, it'll just be nice to hear it in the different generations. So Gavin?
Thankfully, I've never had an experience like that because, like you said, there is an innocence with kids because there wasn't a lot of Black kids in, still, there's not a lot of Black kids in schools, but growing up, there was so many different races and ethnicities that you kind of all just blended to get together and just realize that we're all at school and we're kids. There's not really that much to it. So thankfully, I've never really had to go through anything like that.
Thank you, Gavin. Althema?
I was surprised about Grace too. I really thought it was going to be the other way. And to Gavin's point, and I think that it was even more diverse when I was going through the school systems. No, I didn't see that that type of thing. The only one time I could ever remember like a little contention or there being a race thing, I remember being in the 7th grade and it was the O.J. Simpson case. And that was the only time like that I really remember like it being kind of like that about it was just surrounding that. I just remember that I was in my science class. But that was the only time I really remember like a race and race played the part in something.
Right. I wasn't, for me, growing up, I knew that I didn't have a lot of white friends that lived around me. But when I was in school, I did not feel, especially in the younger years, that I didn't feel race being an issue while I was in school. So I would agree with both you and Gavin. I mean, I did experience it getting older, but not in those younger years. So was I not is Grace not contagious? You could just listen to Grace all day. So Grace talks about another experience, and it was racism in the town, dealing with an outside agency outside of school, but it had to deal with us. She was in the drama club, I believe, and they wanted to perform somewhere. So I want you to hear what happened.
Oh yeah, that's right. In high school, the head of the music department, he had picked four of us for a quartet, and I was the soprano, and another white girl was the alto, Tommy was the tenor, and another guy was the bass. And we used to, he would practice with just the four of us, and we did things, and that was really very, very nice. We sang at assemblies in school and so forth, And so then the women's club, which is right across the street, where the women's, I don't know if it's still there or not. Where the big church is on the corner, okay? And across the street, there's a big building, and that used to be the women's place. They had a women, sort of league of women or something like that. Anyhow, that was their place. And they had social things and so forth. And so they had asked us, to sing. And they were very excited about it. And so I told them, I don't know if I can go there or not, because we never heard of any Black people, Negroes who were then going there. And so even Mr. whatever his name was, didn't realize it or know anything about it. So he said he would check it out. And so they didn't go. They decided that if I couldn't go, they wouldn't go. So that's good.
So they had an opportunity to perform, but because Grace was not invited, the club did not extend an invitation to them if they brought Grace with them. So the club decided not to go because the school was like, we're not going to tolerate that. So they did not go perform. So do you, Gavin or Althema, remember feeling, so before Grace knew that, she told them, I don't think I'm welcome there. So did you ever have a time where you felt like you didn't do something because you didn't feel welcome here, that you might have stopped and declined an invitation because you just felt because of the color of your skin you would not be welcome? Gavin?
Once again, thankfully, no, because me personally, I wasn't necessarily the kid who played instruments a lot growing up, but I was always in sports, and I played from soccer to baseball to basketball, and no matter what, it was always everybody was included. It was like you wanted people to play, like you would bring people with you. So thankfully, I didn't have to experience anything like that.
Okay. And you never felt like you couldn't go somewhere because of the color of your skin? You always felt like if it was a party or something, you never thought about your race. You would just make a decision to go or not.
Not at all. It was always came down to whether you could get there or not, or where the party was. It was never that. It was never, oh, I don't really know if I want to go because of how I look, which is a good thing for me personally growing up.
I'm really glad to hear that, Gavin. It gives some faith in the world. And we need to hear that now. Althema?
I would agree. Growing up, I had a full schedule. I had other things. So it was never like a time that I felt that I couldn't go somewhere. And if it was happening, I just was so busy doing the other things that I never really back then experienced that. We had a lot. And I mean, we had a lot of programs in the school. We had things outside of the school. So I never experienced that.
Okay. So I remember one time experiencing it, wanting to go to a friend's house. She was a white classmate, and she told me I could not come to her house because her dad would not let me in. So that was the one time I remember when everyone was like, let's go to her house. And I was like, I'm not going to go. And it was because I knew I wasn't welcome. So I did experience it. It wasn't all the time, thank goodness, but unfortunately I did. But I'm glad to see 10 years later, Althema, you weren't feeling it. And Gavin, I'm not going to say how many years later you were feeling it as well. So we're headed in the right direction. So we're going to, this is a good one, Black teachers. So Grace is going to talk about the Black teachers in her time.
everything, and
You said you
always,
couldn't be a cheerleader.
huh?
Cheerleader.
Like they never been a cheerleader when I was in school. I never had a black teacher the whole time I was in school. We didn't have any black teachers. Black teachers didn't come until around the time that I graduated from college. I think Hester, did you know Hester? Hester, you ever heard of her? Hester Bateman?
Hester Spencer.
So Grace started in the schools in the 30s, and she didn't know of a Black teacher coming to Ossining until she graduated. So that was Hester Spencer Hines that she is speaking of, that was just honored, right, Diana? She was the Diana Lemon, not Lemon.
Yes.
She was just honored for her work and of not just being the first Black teacher, but administrator, correct, Diana?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So I want to talk about this because Gavin and Althema, I know we all have our list of like our favorite Black teachers. So if you can just give them a nice little shout out, Gavin. So you've seen a lot of Black teachers in your time, correct?
I've seen a lot of Black teachers, but I personally never had one.
Oh,
But,
wow. Okay.
Two of my favorite Black teachers were definitely Mr. Willis and Mr. Norris, well, Mr. Norris used to run the Watu Hente before it became MBK, and Mr. Willis also ran it with him. But it was just like seeing an example of what's possible for you to be, like, because it's not uncommon to see a Black female teacher, but to see a Black male teacher is something that I never really saw until I got to middle school. But those are definitely two big influences of my life as a teacher.
Is that something you want to pursue when you get older? Because you just said that was really important that you said it impacted you to see a Black male in that position. If you could just talk a little bit more about that, I think that's important for people to hear.
Well, I don't see myself being a teacher necessarily, but like I do see myself like teaching other people things, and that's how I really saw them. I didn't really see them as teachers, but more as people I could look up to and learn something from. So that was the influence I got from them. And then just like seeing, because like I said, it wasn't uncommon to see a Black female teacher, but it wasn't also that common. But to see a Black male teacher, especially in middle school, because it's not uncommon to see teachers like that like I had reading teachers like that in elementary school, but to actually see a teacher teaching a class, and then the way Mr. Willis taught his class was that most of the time you don't learn about Black history and social studies throughout all the school unless you take a class for it. But he made sure to incorporate not just Black history, but all the histories that you wouldn't necessarily learn about if you weren't in his class.
Thank you, Gavin. Thank you for sharing that. Althema?
I was fortunate enough to have a bunch of Black teachers. Definitely, it just, the one who sticks out the most is Miss Mitchell, Elizabeth Mitchell. Like just like the culture that she had, like it's just so much. And she took a bunch of us like under her wing. She would take us places and introduce us to books. I remember when Ossining had a bookstore at a time, and we would go there and like different plays and things like that. Just the culture and just the awareness that, you know, showing that it takes a village. So it's like, even if maybe you're not doing it at home, like she really introduced me to Kwanzaa, to those kind of things that you keep. Miss Wright is someone else I remember. You know, just a lot of those women, and even just women in the community. And like Gavin said, it's just a representation that you see someone that looks like you. That can be your aunt, your mom, your sister. You know, that really matters.
Right. Do you guys remember any Black guidance counselors?
Mr. LaCour, of course. And Mrs. Luter.
Okay. Gavin, did you have any Black guidance counselors?
I didn't have any Black guidance counselors, but there's the psychologist when I was in Roosevelt was Black. And because I could relate to her just by her skin color, it made me feel a lot more comfortable, because some of the experiences that I went through, she could probably relate to. So it made me more comfortable with telling her things that I wouldn't necessarily be as comfortable telling anybody else.
Thank you, Gavin. Thank you for sharing that. I remember Mr. Hines in the middle school, the math teacher, Miss Griffin, Miss Davis, the science teacher, Miss Reeves in the high school with math, Miss Mitchell, and Mr. Drinks. I remember being terrified in Mr. Hines' class because he would get that math problem and he'll go, come on, girl, come on, come on, come on, come on. And you'd be so under pressure to get that. You could not think straight. But he would tell us that, especially the Black children, he was hard on all the children. He said, you need to know this, you need math. But he would know a lot of the families. He was here for years. And he says, look, I know your mama. He said, you're going to have to work harder. You know that, right? Because of the way you look, you're going to have to work harder. So the next day, come on, girl, come on, come on, come on. What's the answer? So all of that, come on, girl, got me to learn my math. I was petrified for the whole year that I was in his class, but I appreciate those lessons. So to speak to what you both said, it was very important for me to see myself represented in the schools. Even though I have to admit my favorite teacher was Mr. O. I love Mr. O. But yeah, that was very important for me to see teachers that look like me in the schools. So we're gonna go over to, she talks about an experience during a dance, and this has to do with race. So I just want you to listen and then give me your how you feel about what she's talking about in this incident.
When my brother was growing up, he played in this little band, and they had these dances, not every week, but they would have them maybe once or twice a month on, I think it was Friday nights, and the band would play. That my brother was the only Black person in there playing, and there were no Black people who attended the dance. I was just there playing his saxophone away, okay? Well, so I don't know what got into him, but he decided on one of the numbers to ask a white girl to dance. And he went and asked the girl there, and she was so shocked, and she started crying and everything, yeah. And they reported it to the principal. And then, yeah, so that Monday, Pi got called down to the office, and he didn't know why, but the principal told him that we don't do that, things like that in our school.
What year do you think that was?
Huh?
What year do you think that was?
What year would that have been? That would have been in the 40s. In the 40s, yeah.
So what do you think about the incident that Grace just described about being in a dance? So did you hear what she said? Or do you need me to give a brief synopsis of what she said, or did you hear her clearly?
I heard her clearly, and it was like, in a way, heartbreaking to kind of think about. That wasn't that long ago. Like,
yeah.
It's crazy to think, because I personally have never been to like a school dance, but just like dances in general with other races. Yeah, I never really thought about the girl's color, because it was like, well, it's just a dance. But like, to hear her laughing about it was like, she realized it, and then the fact that like she cried, the other girl, that she cried when asked. So it wasn't even like he was doing anything wrong. It was just a general like just gesture. And it's just crazy to think about. That wasn't that long ago, and to see how much we've came to now, where I can go dance not wherever I want, but when I'm at a dance, I can dance with pretty much whoever I want. Mm-hmm. It's crazy to kind of think about.
Thank you, Gavin. Althema, what was your reaction to Grace's?
I felt bad. Like, I mean, but to Gavin's point, some of this stuff wasn't that long ago. Like, she's still living. So the fact is, that's not really ancient history. Like, it's like, to me, I was thinking about like the movie, like Hairspray, like, it's like, that's something that you see on television and it like happened to someone where we live at.
Right.
And even though, you know, things are going, it's like, you know, you couldn't really imagine living like that.
Yeah, I think to what you said, that was really important that you see it on TV. And a lot of times we disconnect to something that is a reality for us, or we've swept it under the rug, or we don't bring it to light. So I think it's important in this time where we're saying as a community that we want to heal, that we have to like bring this stuff to the surface and just air it out, because the elders are raising us, right? So they're giving us how we feel about each other and passing it on to us. So we have to start healing as a community, right? And get this stuff out. I was heartbroken to hear when, you know, he was the only Black gentleman. He just felt enough to just say, like Gavin said, you know, I just want to dance with you. And that made her cry. You know, I'm imagining how her brother felt. Like, I didn't mean to make you cry. I just wanted to dance with you. And she probably was petrified. You know, you don't know what she was taught. And it obviously scared her enough to cry. I'm sure she had her makeup done in her best dress. She didn't want to mess that up. And then, you know, she's crying. So it was sad all around to hear that. So we're going to move on. Grace talks about activities, what there is to do in Ossining in her time. So when we come back on, we can talk about or address what she says, but if you could talk about what there was available for you to do in Ossining when you were growing up.
The basketball games.
Right.
During basketball games.
Right.
Right.
The at the rec.
At the rec, right.
Yeah, the rec was a place that the Black kids went, you know, and they would go on the weekends and weeknights, I think, too. And that was a big thing.
Yeah, but it was separate, right? Separate. White folks went.
Yeah. I'm not even sure. I didn't go.
So they had their own night. They did have their own night.
They did.
It was
Yeah.
separate. We had our own night.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't go too much to the rec. You know, maybe to a game or something, but not to dance. Yeah.
So to give a little more historical background on what Grace is talking about, the Recreation Center in the 30s had a separate commission for what they called Negro. We were Negro at the time. There was a Negro Recreation Commission, and that they served only the needs of the Negro community. So there were separate events that happened. Now, the Black events usually were the most well-attended events, and they were quite active. The schedule was very active. And we even had our own playground on Hunter Street. There was a playground for Negro children. So that happened. But what do you remember doing growing up? What was available for you during your time growing up? Gavin?
So when I wasn't in school, like what I would do most of the time was just like play outside with my friends and everything. But like the same way that she talks about the rec center is basically the same way it is now, where most of the time you don't see anybody else besides like Black kids and the occasional Hispanic person. But it's not even that because it's not allowed, but it's more just something that we all kind of grew to love. And like it's just the company of being able to play basketball with each other and like the competitiveness of it that like makes you want to go. And then at Nelson Park, when it's warm out, that's where usually everybody comes because you have so many different basketball courts and hoops that you have all the different ages there. And then with the field, you have a lot more to do. So those are the main things that I did growing up, at least when I wasn't in school or playing sports.
When you were at the park, Gavin, did you see more diversity at the park?
Always. Whenever you go to a park, it's a whole bunch of different kids and different ages because most of the parks now have two different like jungle gyms because you have the two different age groups. So you would see the younger kids and then you would see the kids my age where you would be playing on the playground and then you see all different types of colors and all different types of games going on, which is like kind of calm chaos in a way.
Thank you. Althema?
Growing up, I feel like we had a lot to do. So when I lived on that side, I lived by the rec. We had the pool was there in the summertime. The rec had the game room. It was totally different rec than what it seems like it is now. We had so many, like, there was after school clubs. We had the CAP where you can do a lot of things. So there was always something to keep you busy.
I remember, I don't remember who sponsored it, but I remember going to dances. I was really excited about going and getting a new outfit and going to the dance. I remember dances at the middle school. I know that's when I think I broke up with my first boyfriend. It was traumatizing. But I remember those things. Those give you the fond memories of childhood, as having those dances and those things made available to you and gave you something to look forward to as a kid in the neighborhood. So thank you for sharing. So the last segment we're going to share of Grace's before we take some questions is she talks about having friends of a different race and what that looked like when she was growing up.
Yeah, and you know, because it wasn't every day, but I didn't think it was so different. Yeah, right.
Some of those things I think we just didn't think about.
Huh?
We knew if we walked in the room full of white folks, we were different, but
Yeah.
when we were amongst ourselves, it was just like, fun or.
So in town, there was really, for you guys, you didn't really experience like blatant racism?
Well, yes, we did in my time, but it wasn't, like your feelings weren't hurt because you just accepted it because this is the way it was. But Gloria, the girl in that picture, we were really good friends, and she had some white friends, and I had white friends, but we only just did things together in school, or maybe after school, but we never went to their parties, and they never came to our parties. And I remember Gloria saying to me, "Isn't it strange? We can be good friends with white people in school, but we can't go down." Do you know Kip's? I don't know, it was Kip's Pharmacy, and they had that bar in there. Fountain.
I know it was there.
Okay, yes. Yeah. And she says, "But we can't go with them down and have a Coke and sit down and have a Coke with them at Kip's, And I said, "Oh boy, that's just the way it is. We don't need their Coke, or something like that." But I remember that very well. Yeah, you didn't socialize.
Even in Woolworths, wasn't it like that in Woolworths?
Well, and yeah, no, we could. I think we could sit down, but I don't know. I never sat down with a white person, but we could sit down in Woolworths at that fountain. But you didn't do any, socializing.
You know what I remember?
How does that make you feel to hear that the acceptance of, we knew what not to do? How did that make you feel, Gavin, to hear that?
Heartbreaking in a way, because like she's talking about just sitting down and enjoying a soda with somebody. Mm-hmm. Now you can go over to each other's house and not necessarily have to worry about that. But like just like growing up, I had friends of all different colors and different genders, and then you never really thought about it, like what you were doing, because you were just enjoying the time together. But like now as I get older, like you kind of do realize that there is still not necessarily a divide, but differences between the two that you kind of have to, in order to be friends with each other, you have to both understand those differences and kind of speak on them. But just hearing her say that she accepted it, and just thinking about today's times where even the slightest, like, it's not just a word, but the slightest saying can get everything taken away from you. But back then it was, you just had to accept it, which is progress, but you don't really know if it's going in the right or the wrong way.
Thank you, Gavin. Althema?
That was sad. It's sad to hear, especially, I guess, when her friend was saying, how come we can be friends in school, but not in public? It kind of goes back to what you said about, not being able to go to a friend's house. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, I didn't experience that. When I lived on Aqueduct Street, I felt like it was like United Nations. Like everybody was on my street. and we were a melting pot, and everyone, everybody played together. One of my oldest friends, we're still friends to this day. She's Honduran. The other friend, she's from Dominican Republic. Our next door neighbor was Greek. Like, we just played. You didn't think about it. We went through schools together because, there's only really one set of schools. We're all still friendly, and, we speak and keep in touch now. So it's disheartened to see that people went through those things. And I don't want to say that it doesn't exist. I just personally didn't experience it. Honestly, I think it probably would more exist right now. But I'm glad that Gavin isn't experiencing it. But because I think that things are now becoming more blatant in the times that we're living in. And, social media also has played a bigger part of that. So, that was my experience.
Thank you. So I will share, I experienced it quite often growing up when I got older, even sometimes younger in the Girl Scouts on a sleepover. None of the girls would be bothered with me, and they said they didn't have to because I was Black. So the troop leader's assistant was the only one for that whole night that would talk to me. And I went on to high school with these girls, but I saw a shift because by the time we left, we were speaking and we still, chat, but that happened. And even my daughter now, she's 19. She had a Hispanic friend that told us that she couldn't come in our house because her mother said we were going to poison her with our food. So, those things still happen, and it's sad. So I think Gavin said this, that we have to start talking to each other and understanding our differences, and we have to start changing perceptions. We can't change everybody, one person at a time, but what people perceive of each other needs to change as well. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences. I know it's hard talking about some of these things, but this is where we start. You just experienced listening to four different generations of people talking about their experiences living in one spot. So if anyone has any questions, Diana, did you want to fire off any questions? Did you see any?
I didn't see any in the chat, but I had one actually. If we can start with that for Gavin. Okay, Gavin, you talked about a couple of your Black teachers, and it really sounded like you had more of a mentoring relationship with them, more than just the classroom. So I just wanted to ask you, like, how important is that mentorship and that having the role models in your life now, as having especially Black men as your role models and your mentors? How important is that to you?
There's no other way to put it besides very important, because growing up with a single mother, I didn't have the father there to like set the mentorship. So when you're going to school and seeing people who are successful in your eyes and doing well for themselves, it was always more than just like the teacher to me. It was more like somebody who I can trust with things that I couldn't necessarily talk about with my mom, right? So like you said, it was more of a mentorship rather than a student to teacher relationship, because every single day on Thursdays I was there, the first one there and the last one to leave, just because the conversations that we would have, like the whole group, was just stuff that we could all relate to. And then with the two teachers, you can get two different perspectives on it. And it always was a great conversation and a great place to be. So, like you said, it wasn't necessarily just a student to teacher relationship, it was more of a mentorship.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, maybe Joyce and Althema, if you want to speak to that also, having mentors and role models.
Althema?
Like I said, Miss Mitchell, Miss Wright. I laugh when Joyce talked about, teacher saying, "I know your mom." Like, I'll never forget one day, like, saying something and Ms. Wright called my mom. And I was like, "You called my mother? Like, why would you do that?" But I mean, like, kind of sparked off a relationship that, I still, talk to Ms. Wright to this day. And, unfortunately, Miss Mitchell has passed away. But seeing women like that, I mean, these women knew multiple languages. They were professional. They, had culture. They knew things. And it was just like, bringing us, to me, like introducing that world to people. Like I felt honored. Like it wasn't I mean, it was a few of us, but it was just like, like you chose to teach me something that I didn't know. And that is important. And, even now seeing in schools, we also had like Miss Lyman, and we had other, Mr. Grady, and we had all these clubs, and Mrs. Sims. You had these teachers that were pouring into these kids. My nephews don't live here anymore. I only know, like I'm fortunate enough to know Gavin. I know kids through, my friends' children and things, but I don't see as many of the teachers, sewing into the children like we had. So I kind of, think that, knowing that I'm fortunate that I had those relationships with teachers, and especially ones who looked like me, made a difference.
Yeah, I would agree with that. When I was growing up, I didn't see a lot of us on TV. So my standard of beauty was Lucille Ball. I would take the pillowcase off of the pillow and put it on my hair to simulate long blonde hair. So when I start seeing teachers that look like me, Miss Davis and I would just be like, oh, look at her. I'm going to dress just like her when I get older. And she's so smart. She's a science teacher. So I started to perceive myself differently. I started to see that I can do something different, and that achieving things that I thought were of higher level, when I was only seeing it in someone else's nationality, now I see it in mine. That I can, as a Black person, be a science teacher, that I can be a business teacher like Mr. Drinks, or, I can be a guidance counselor or a social worker. So it is important that kids see a representation of themselves, regardless of what they look like. Whatever they look like, they need to see themselves doing other things. They need to see a different perception of themselves. So that is my experience.
Thank you all for sharing that.
So I think, there's a question for Gavin. For Gavin, do you have any contact with other schools and sports that would bring different views of life to your attention as a student?
When you ask that, do you mean necessarily like the treatment of the students and like the way the sports are played, or necessarily just the interactions between the two? I'm just kind of confused about the question.
Sandy, can you elaborate? I don't want to speak for you for what I understood of it. Can you simplify that maybe for him?
I was just thinking, when you have contact, if you're in sports, that you have contact with other schools and students, do you often see a different kind of relationship that students have within their schools or with the Ossining schools? Does anything come to your perspective?
Yeah, you notice more that because my JV coach is actually another Black male, Jordan Archibald. So you realize more that not necessarily that you look up more to him, but like kind of respect him more in a way, because you know that that's another place that you see yourself in. So you have a better relationship with both of your coaches now, and then you notice more that when you go to other schools and you see the coaches, it's usually the same tall white dude, or that's usually what it is. So when you see the different ethnicities in the coaches and everything, it's kind of like it feels good knowing that that's another thing that you can do.
What about your interaction with those students in the other schools, Gavin? When you go there, do you see, do you guys get treated differently? Do you think that outside of Ossining and?
Not at all. Even because for the past 4 games, besides the one I played in today, we've been away, and no matter what, we all got treated the same. Always, there was never any difference between our bench and the other, or the way the refs called the plays or anything. It was always the same treatment no matter what.
Thank you, Gavin. So I was asked what stood out as the biggest change in Ossining from my conversation with Ms. Grace. So I will say the biggest change to me is the lack of acceptance of racism. It's not accepted. People are not taking it as lightly as, I wouldn't say they were lightly, but they swept it under the rug. They just kind of want to move on with their life. I think especially Gavin's generation is not having it, and they're sticking up, for each other, and they just don't want to accept it anymore. So they're putting their foot down, even with us as their parents. Like, I don't care if this is how you feel. We're not doing this anymore. It has to stop somewhere. So that is the biggest, I really thank you, Gavin, for saying a lot of things you said today, because from Grace to listening to you, I think that's it, is these kids are like, we're not doing this anymore. We have more things in common than we have different, and we're not doing it. And they're even standing up to their parents and elders. Respectfully, we need to do that respectfully. I don't want to push any other narrative, but they are putting their foot down, and it's a good thing. So Diana, I think we're out of time. It's a
Yeah.
o'clock.
Yeah, if there's no more questions, I want to thank all three of you and Grace for an amazing discussion and insight into Ossining, both, the past, the present, and the future. And that's really exciting to see that change. I just want to add, we're going to continue our Ossining Perspective series in April. I think another Saturday, April 17th at 10 a.m. with the town historian, Scott Craven, who's also works for us at the library. And Scott's going to really look at the big picture of immigration in Ossining with a presentation called Ossining Immigration, an Ongoing Tradition. So I hope to see you then. It'll be on the calendar soon, so you can register again. And I thank everyone for attending. And again, to our guests, it was an amazing discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
All right.
Thank
Everyone
you.
be well.
You too.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks, Gavin. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Gary.